My name is Clara Nora, and the vineyard you're looking at, the rolling green hills, the sun melting into rows of grapes, the century-old stone cellar carved beneath the earth, that is not just land to me, it is my blood, my sweat, and the only legacy my grandfather left behind before he died with. Dirt still under his fingernails. While my older sister Vanessa chased luxury apartments in New York City and posted filtered photos of champagne brunches in Los Angeles, I stayed here in our quiet valley outside Napa, waking up at 4 a.m., pruning vines in the freezing dark, negotiating distribution deals, studying soil chemistry, and slowly transforming our struggling family property into a premium vineyard brand collectors actually respected. Every bottle in my vintage cellar carried history. Some worth $3,000, some $5,000, and a few irreplaceable reserves that were never meant to be sold, only honored. But last month, without asking me, without even warning me, my sister decided this vineyard was the perfect backdrop for her $85,000 engagement party, a glittering spectacle for her wealthy fiancé's elite friends. She sent out invitations, hired caterers, installed crystal lights between my vines, and worst of all, she gave guests private access to my underground vintage cellar like it was a party prop. When I arrived early that evening after a supplier meeting and saw strangers holding my rarest bottles like party favors, laughing over glasses of a 1998 reserve valued at $5,000 per pour, something inside me cracked, but I said nothing. I stood there quietly, dust still on my boots, listening as Vanessa clinked her glass for a toast and introduced me to her fiancé's family with a careless smile. "Oh, that's just Clara. She helps around here. She's basically the gardener." The room laughed softly. Just the gardener. In the vineyard I built. In the cellar I restored. In the legacy I saved. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply watched as she lifted another glass of my most expensive wine to her lips. Because sometimes the best revenge doesn't begin with shouting. It begins with waiting. I didn't correct her. I didn't defend myself. I simply adjusted the cuff of my work jacket, wiped the soil from my hands, and walked deeper into the party like I truly was just part of the landscaping. Vanessa had transformed my vineyard into something unrecognizable, imported orchids wired around my century-old vines, rented marble bars positioned over irrigation lines I personally installed, a string quartet playing near the fermentation shed as if it were some European estate instead of the place where I once cried over unpaid invoices. Guests in designer gowns stepped over the same gravel paths I laid stone by stone. They admired the ambiance, praising my sister's vision, never realizing the real vision was built over 12 years of sleepless harvest seasons and bank meetings where I begged for extensions. And then I saw it, the cellar door wide open. That cellar is sacred. Temperature controlled, humidity regulated, cataloged down to the bottle. Each crate logged, each cork monitored. My grandfather's handwriting still marks the back wall where he noted the first successful harvest in 1974. It is not a wine room, it is a vault of memory. Inside, Vanessa's fiancé Richard was giving a tour like he owned it. "We thought it would be fun to let everyone taste something rare," he said, holding a 1998 Reserve Cabernet. My 1998 Reserve Cabernet. Only 18 bottles left in existence, each valued at $5,000. Each one part of a private collector's allocation I had carefully protected. One of his friends popped the cork without even checking the seal integrity. The sound echoed in the stone chamber like a gunshot. I felt it in my chest. They passed the bottle around casually. Someone swirled it too aggressively. Another added ice to a vintage that survived 26 years of careful aging. A woman laughed and said, "It's good, but I've had better in Italy." Another guest asked if we had anything stronger. Vanessa walked in moments later, glowing in her white silk dress, diamond ring flashing under the cellar lights. She saw me standing in the corner and smiled that tight, polished smile she uses when she wants to appear generous. "Oh. There she is," she announced to the group. "Clara keeps everything running. She's amazing with plants. Honestly, I don't know how grapes even grow. I just knew this place would look stunning for the party." Richard chuckled. "Every estate needs a groundskeeper, right?" More laughter. I looked at the wine in their glasses. Deep ruby. Perfect legs. 26 years of discipline reduced to party decor. I should have exploded. But anger is loud. Revenge is quiet. So instead, I excused myself politely and stepped outside, letting the cool night air hit my face. I walked past the catering tents, past the hired valet line, straight to the small office near the processing barn. I opened my laptop, logged into the estate management system. Every bottle in that cellar is digitally registered. Everyone scanned. And I had something Vanessa didn't know. The rarest bottles the collector reserves were insured individually, not under the Vineyard's name, under mine. I pulled up the inventory log. 6 bottles already scanned out by the catering team, 4 opened, 2 in circulation. Estimated immediate loss, $30,000 and rising. Then I opened another file, the event contract. Because yes, she had rented my vineyard, but she never read the fine print. When Vanessa called 3 months ago asking to borrow the space, I told her everything had to be official. Liability reasons. She rolled her eyes and agreed, assuming I was being overly cautious. Clause 14b. Any unauthorized access to restricted inventory areas results in a usage penalty of 5 times the retail value of opened product. 5 times. I leaned back in my chair and did the math slowly. $5,000 per bottle, 4 bottles open, 5 times penalty, $100,000. And that was just the start. Outside, fireworks suddenly lit up the sky. Richard must have added that dramatic surprise proposal moment. Guests cheered. Music swelled. I closed the laptop gently. I wasn't done calculating. Because the irrigation lines under those marble bars? If damaged, replacement cost, $18,000. The vines wrapped too tightly in wired orchids? If stressed or broken during peak season, projected crop loss? 6 figures. And I had footage. Every inch of this property is monitored. Not because I don't trust people, but because I built it alone. I walked back toward the cellar slowly, calmly, watching as another cork flew into the air, another priceless vintage poured into crystal glasses like it came from a grocery shelf. Vanessa caught my eye again, lifted her glass high, and toasted loudly. To new beginnings, and to finally turning this old dirt patch into something glamorous. The crowd applauded. She drank deeply. And I smiled for the first time that night. Because she still thought I was just the gardener. She had no idea she had just turned her $85,000 engagement party into the most expensive mistake of her life. By the time the 5th bottle was opened, the mood in the cellar had shifted from celebration to indulgence. Laughter grew louder. Movements became careless. A man in a tailored navy suit nearly knocked over a rack of horizontally aged bottles while trying to take a selfie. Someone else leaned against a temperature panel like it was part of the decor. I stood at the base of the stone staircase, watching quietly, memorizing faces, memorizing gestures. Revenge is not built on impulse. It's built on documentation. Upstairs, the party had reached its peak. A luxury catering company from San Francisco was plating truffle canapes on gold-rimmed dishes. A drone circled above the vineyard, capturing cinematic footage for Vanessa's social media reveal. The string quartet had transitioned into a DJ set. My vines, my carefully pruned, season-sensitive vines, were glowing under rented chandeliers that radiated more heat than anyone had calculated. I checked my phone. 3 irrigation alerts. Pressure irregularity in the southern block. I walked calmly toward the source. One of the marble cocktail bars had been positioned directly over a main drip line. Under the weight of the structure and the constant foot traffic, the line had cracked. Water seeped slowly into the soil, invisible to guests in heels and polished loafers. Crop damage doesn't announce itself dramatically. It shows up months later, and I knew exactly how much that block produced annually. $240,000 worth of premium yield. I didn't stop the leak. Not yet. Instead, I called my estate manager, Daniel. "Are the external cameras recording clearly?" I asked. "Crystal clear," he replied. "Why?" "Make backup copies. All angles, especially cellar access." There was a pause. "Clara, what's happening?" I watched through the glass doors as Vanessa laughed dramatically, clinging to Richard's arm. "Just archiving memories," I said softly. Then I hung up. Back inside, I finally stepped fully into the cellar. This time, I didn't stand in the shadows. I walked straight toward Richard, who was mid-sentence explaining how he planned to expand production and modernize the brand. "Interesting vision," I said calmly. He turned, slightly startled. Vanessa rolled her eyes playfully. "Clara, relax. We're celebrating." "With my 1998 reserve?" I asked, glancing at the nearly empty bottle in his hand. Vanessa sighed. "It's wine. That's what it's for." "No," I said gently. "That one wasn't." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Richard smirked. "We'll replace it." "You can't," I replied. Silence. "Because there are only 18 bottles left in existence," I continued. "And you just opened 5. Vanessa laughed dismissively. "Don't be dramatic." I stepped closer to the central tasting table and placed my phone down. I opened the inventory log and rotated the screen toward them. Each scanned bottle, each valuation, each insured certificate. The room grew quieter. "You're looking at approximately $25,000 in open product," I said evenly. "Subject to a 5 times penalty under the event agreement." Vanessa blinked. "What agreement? The one you signed?" Richard's smirk faded slightly. "I didn't read all that legal stuff," she snapped. "I know," I said. The DJ upstairs blasted music, muffled through the stone walls. A bass vibration pulsed through the cellar like a heartbeat. Richard cleared his throat. "Clara, let's not ruin the evening over paperwork." "I'm not ruining anything," I replied calmly. "You did." Vanessa stepped forward, lowering her voice. "Why are you doing this? You're embarrassing me. You introduced me as the gardener," I said softly. "I'm acting like management." Her face flushed. A guest quietly placed their glass down. Another cork popped upstairs. I continued, my tone steady and almost detached. "Additionally, there's irrigation damage in the southern block. Estimated impact if yield stress occurs, low 6 figures. Now the room was fully silent. Richard stared at me. "You're bluffing." I smiled slightly. "The cameras aren't." Vanessa's expression shifted from annoyance to uncertainty. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "I already have," I replied. I picked up my phone and tapped one final screen. The estate's legal advisor. "On standby since 6 p.m. Because when Vanessa first told me about her vision for the party, I knew something important. She had always mistaken kindness for weakness. And tonight, she mistook ownership for access. Footsteps echoed above us as more guests began descending into the cellar, unaware they were walking into a financial storm disguised as a celebration. Vanessa grabbed my arm. Clara, stop this right now. I gently removed her hand. You wanted glamour, I said quietly. Now you get the invoice. And just then, as fireworks exploded again over the vineyard, lighting the stone walls in flashes of gold, I heard the front gates close. Because I had instructed security earlier, no one leaves until damages are assessed. The party wasn't over. It was just beginning. The music upstairs continued, but the energy had shifted. People could feel it. Laughter sounded forced now. Glasses clinked more cautiously, and whispers spread faster than the wine had. I walked out of the cellar without raising my voice, without creating a scene, yet somehow the entire atmosphere followed me like a shadow. Guests watched as I stepped onto the main terrace, fireworks still bursting above the vineyard that I built vine by vine. Security had quietly sealed the gates, just as instructed. No drama, no shouting, just procedure. Vanessa hurried behind me, her heels sinking slightly into the gravel she once mocked me for choosing. Clara, unlock the gates, she hissed through clenched teeth, her polished smile long gone. I turned slowly, facing not just her, but her fiancé, their guests, and the illusion she had carefully staged. The gates open, I said calmly, when liabilities are acknowledged. Richard tried to regain control of the narrative. He stepped forward confidently, adjusting his cufflinks like this was a boardroom negotiation. Let's settle this privately, he suggested, voice tight but measured. You're overreacting. I handed him my phone. On the screen were live camera feeds, guests mishandling bottles, staff entering restricted cellar zones, the cracked irrigation line leaking beneath the marble bar. Time-stamped. Recorded. Backed up. His jaw tightened. Vanessa looked at the footage like she was watching her own reflection crack. You set this up, she accused quietly. No, I corrected her, my voice steady as stone. You walked into it. Around us, the guests began placing glasses down, some subtly stepping away from the cellar entrance as if distance could erase responsibility. I finally addressed the crowd, not loudly, but clearly enough to cut through the music. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's engagement celebration exceeded its venue permissions. Premium inventory was accessed without authorization. Agricultural infrastructure was compromised. As the legal owner of this estate, I am required to document and bill accordingly. A murmur rippled through the terrace. Vanessa's face drained of color. This wasn't the gardener speaking. This was the proprietor, the investor, the one whose name was on every deed, every insurance document, every contract signature. I looked directly at my sister, not with anger, not with tears, but with something far colder. You wanted everyone to know who I am, I said quietly. Now they do. Vanessa's hands trembled slightly as she tried to speak, but no words came out. She looked at Richard, hoping he would intervene, but he was frozen, staring at my phone screen like a man realizing he'd stepped into a trap he couldn't escape. Guests murmured, some shifting uncomfortably, others whispering to each other about what they'd just witnessed. The illusion of a glamorous party, the curated Instagram perfect moment, was crumbling in real time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I simply walked through the crowd, each step measured, confident, like I owned every inch of the vineyard. And in truth I did. The cracked irrigation line, the trampled vines under marble bars, the opened $5,000 bottles, all of it pointed to one undeniable fact. Vanessa had treated my life's work as her playground. And now the consequences were tangible, visible, and irreversible. Richard finally spoke, trying to salvage the situation. Clara, this is extreme. Can't we just... His words faltered as I lifted my hand, signaling him to stop. I had anticipated his arguments. I had calculated every scenario, every loose word, every smirk, every casual, just the gardener comment. None of it would go unanswered. Extreme? I said calmly. No, this is called accountability. I turned to the guests, letting my gaze sweep across the faces of people who had come to celebrate wealth and romance, but were now witnessing responsibility in its rawest form. Every bottle of wine opened without authorization will be invoiced at 5 times its retail value. Every compromised irrigation line and trampled vine will be assessed for crop loss. Security footage is being sent to my legal team. Nothing here is negotiable. The murmur of the crowd grew louder, a mix of awe, fear, and fascination. Vanessa stepped forward again, desperate. "Clara, please, I didn't know." I cut her off with a simple, deliberate gesture. "You didn't know, and that's why you will pay. Not because of anger, not because of me, but because of the choices you made." The room fell silent, save for the soft hum of the ventilation in the cellar and the distant echo of fireworks outside. I could feel the weight of the moment, the absolute shift of power. This was no longer a party, it was a lesson. Vanessa's perfect image of control, her curated engagement fantasy, it was collapsing before her eyes. I stepped back slightly, letting her and Richard fully grasp the magnitude of what had just unfolded. I've waited years to protect this vineyard, to honor my grandfather's legacy, and to prove my worth. Tonight, I said, my voice steady, cold, and final, you've treated it as a prop for your vanity. I am not just the gardener. I am Clara Nora. And from this night forward, everyone here will know exactly who owns this place, and exactly who is responsible for every consequence. Vanessa's face had turned pale. Her perfectly applied makeup now streaked as panic replaced confidence. She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. I stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, letting the tension in the room tighten like a drawn bowstring. Every guest now watched silently, their champagne glasses paused mid-air, their laughter gone. "You treated my home like a stage," I said evenly, my voice calm but filled with authority. "You treated my cellar, my vines, and my legacy like props for your Instagram feed. Every joke about me being just the gardener has been noted, every smirk recorded, and every careless action catalogued." My gaze swept across the room, landing on the shattered elegance of her party, the trampled vines beneath the marble bars, the expensive wines poured into careless hands, the ornamental orchids drooping from the weight of feet and decorations. "Do you understand now?" I asked, not angrily, but with the quiet force of inevitability. "You are accountable for every single choice you made tonight. And nothing," I paused, letting the words sink in, "nothing is negotiable." Richard tried to interject, stammering, "Clara, please, let's just—" I held up my hand. "No. You had your fun. You drank my $5,000 bottles without thought. You paraded through my vineyard like you owned it. And now, it's time to reconcile that with reality." I reached for my phone and swiped to the inventory list, highlighting each bottle opened, each crate tampered with, and every piece of property affected. "Your $85,000 engagement party," I continued, "just turned into a $250,000 liability, legal fees, damages, insurance penalties, and replacement costs included. And that's conservative." I let the number hang in the air. Vanessa's lips quivered. Her eyes darted toward her guests, many of whom whispered behind hands, clearly reassessing the narrative of this so-called celebration. Every smile she had crafted for Instagram, every moment she flaunted wealth and glamour, had been reduced to numbers, to consequences, to accountability. I paused, letting the weight of my words and the inevitability of retribution sink in fully. The guests no longer made eye contact with Vanessa, and even Richard's attempt at a confident fade crumbled under the magnitude of the evidence. I leaned slightly toward Vanessa. Speaking quietly but with precision, you always assumed kindness was weakness. That I would stand silently while my legacy was paraded around. That I would allow you to turn my life into a backdrop for your vanity. You were wrong. Dead wrong. And tonight you learned the hard way that every choice has consequences. My voice was steady, measured, and every syllable struck like a bell of authority through the cellar and the terrace above. She swallowed hard, realizing that the empire she had mocked, the family she had underestimated, and the sister she had dismissed as just the gardener had not only survived her reckless display, but was orchestrating the reckoning. Finally, I straightened, letting a faint, controlled smile cross my face. I gestured toward the vineyard bathed in the glow of evening fireworks, every meticulously planted vine and carefully curated barrel a testament to years of labor and sacrifice. "This vineyard," I said, voice echoing just enough for everyone to hear, "is more than a party venue. It is my life, my family, and my legacy. And as of tonight, every guest here knows exactly who runs this place, and who ensures that respect is never taken for granted." The murmurs grew, some impressed, some nervous. Vanessa stepped back, speechless. Richard clenched his jaw, his previous arrogance gone, and I knew, without a doubt, that the lesson had landed perfectly. The party, which had begun as a glittering display of her pride, was now a masterclass in accountability. Quiet, precise, and unforgettable did evening air fill my lungs as I surveyed the aftermath of the night. The party lights reflected off the shattered illusions Vanessa had so meticulously built, the sparkling gowns and designer shoes now dulled by the reality of consequence. Every guest, once laughing and clinking glasses, now stood silent, eyes flicking between my calm, unshaken figure and the evidence displayed clearly on my phone and the estate monitors. I could feel the weight of authority settle around me like armor. No anger, no shouting, just the undeniable force of truth and preparation. Vanessa's fiancé, Richard, finally looked me in the eye, his previous arrogance replaced with a wary, uncomfortable respect. He realized that the estate, the vines, the cellar, and the legacy they had, all treated like props, were far beyond their grasp. Tonight, no social media post, no glittering toast, no staged elegance could rewrite reality. I had waited patiently, silently, letting every careless gesture, every insult, every misuse of my life's work pile up like stakes in a game of chess I had been playing for years, and now it was checkmate. I walked slowly to the center of the terrace, where the remaining guests lingered uneasily, glasses in hand, but their smiles hollow. My voice was calm, measured, and carried a quiet authority that made even the loudest chatter fade. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, letting each word land like a bell of inevitability, tonight was meant to be a celebration of love, of glamour, and of wealth. But it became a test of respect, accountability, and awareness of what is real versus what is superficial. Every bottle of wine opened without permission, every vine trampled, every marble bar placed carelessly over irrigation lines, it has a cost. Not because I am vengeful, but because every choice has consequences. Responsibility is not optional, and respect is not negotiable. My sister learned this tonight, not through anger or confrontation, but through the undeniable facts. I gestured subtly toward the cellar, where the few remaining bottles of the 1998 reserve glimmered under the stone lights, a silent testament to patience, diligence, and preservation. The guests whispered, glancing at one another. Even Vanessa, whose face was pale and unsteady, could no longer dismiss me as just the gardener. I stepped closer to her, keeping my tone firm but calm, almost conversational, as if explaining a simple principle to someone who had failed to grasp it until now. "Vanessa," I said, voice measured, "you've always assumed that privilege and wealth could shield you from accountability. You've assumed that ignoring the hard work behind the scenes, treating people's efforts as invisible, and mocking responsibility would have no consequences. Tonight, you saw otherwise. You saw the value of patience, preparation, and quiet authority. You saw that respect cannot be taken. It must be earned, preserved, and protected. This vineyard, these vines, this cellar, they are more than property. They are my legacy, my responsibility, and my proof that diligence and care matter. You may have hosted the party, but I orchestrated the lesson. And now you understand the price of carelessness. The final words hung in the night air as fireworks ended, leaving only the soft glow of the vineyard's lanterns. Guests lowered their glasses, murmurs soft but reverent. Vanessa's eyes, once filled with confidence and entitlement, now reflected something different: recognition, humility, and a hint of fear. Richard simply nodded. No words necessary, the lesson understood. I turned toward the vineyard itself, letting my gaze sweep over the rows of grapes, the stone cellar, and the estate I had built from nothing. Every painstaking hour, every sacrifice, every careful decision had led to this moment, the ultimate vindication. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked. I had been called just the gardener, but tonight I was no longer invisible. I was the architect of consequence, the master of my domain, and the keeper of legacy. I exhaled slowly, letting the silence of understanding settle like a cloak over the estate. My phone buzzed with messages from the legal team, confirming invoices and damage assessments, yet I didn't need to look. I already knew the impact: financial, emotional, and reputational. Vanessa had been humbled, her grand illusion shattered, and the lesson imprinted permanently. I looked back once at her, her shoulders slumped, her arrogance stripped away, and finally allowed myself a small, private smile. Quiet. Controlled. Precise. Revenge does not need fireworks or shouting. It thrives in patience, strategy, and the unshakable certainty of rightful power. Tonight, the vineyard remained mine, my legacy intact, and my name, Clara Nora, echoed in every corner of stone, soil, and vine. And as the night settled into a calm, victorious quiet, I knew that true authority never announces itself with noise. It announces itself with results. The party was over. The lesson was delivered. And I, the gardener no more, had emerged victorious.